the man who never ran from anything. Go on, hit subscribe before the darkness catches up to you. Like the video if you dare, drop a comment if you make it to the end. Trust me, you'll want to. The night Sergei Antonov vanished, the city of Kazimir felt like it was holding its breath. A late winter storm hung low over the rooftops, turning the streets into mirrors of black ice. Blue police lights cut through the snowfall as officers sprinted between alleyways, boots crunching, radios hissing with incomplete sentences. A body had been found, wedged behind a shuttered pharmacy, half buried in snow, with bruises that told a clear story. Someone powerful had delivered justice their own way. A second report crashed through the police frequency moments later. Suspect spotted fleeing north on Volkov Street. That was when Detective Anya Mirova's instincts kicked in. She threw her car door open before it fully stopped and bolted across the frozen pavement. She wasn't chasing just anyone. She was chasing a man who had been whispered about in backrooms, documented in sealed case files, and feared even by criminals who claimed to fear nothing. Sergei Antonov, a former mid-level enforcer for a regional crime syndicate. A man known not for brutality, but for precision. The kind of criminal who left nothing messy, nothing traceable, until tonight. She spotted him turning a corner, slipping across the ice with a limp, blood trailing behind him in thin black streaks. He looked exhausted, desperate, cornered. For the first time in his life, Sergei Antonov was running. Stop. Hands where I can see them. Anya shouted. Sergei didn't stop. Instead, he turned his head slightly, just enough for her to see it. Fear. Real fear. The kind that didn't belong to a hardened criminal. The kind that suggested he wasn't running from police, but toward something even worse. Anya gained ground. He slipped again. She lunged. They crashed into the snow, her knee pinning his wrist before his hand could reach for anything hidden beneath his coat. As officers swarmed the alley, he whispered just loud enough for her to hear. You have no idea what you've done. His voice wasn't threatening. It was hollow, defeated. Within hours, Sergei Antonov was in custody. A single charge quickly became 3, then 5, and soon the courts moved faster than the storm clouds rolling over the city. But the strangest detail came from the autopsy report. The bruises on the victim weren't consistent with Sergei's fighting style. They weren't consistent with anyone known in Kazimir. Someone else had been there first. Someone who vanished without a trace. The case should have ended with Sergei's sentencing, 22 years in a high-security facility. Instead, something curious happened. A federal transport order was issued despite this being a regional case. Sergei wasn't going to an ordinary prison. He was headed to Black Dolphin. The transport officers exchanged looks when they saw his paperwork. It was unusual for someone with his charges, though serious, to be sent to one of the most secure prisons in the country, a place designed for inmates the system could not risk ever escaping, ever influencing, ever seeing freedom again. Anya watched from a distance as 2 armored vans prepared to escort him. Chains clacked like metal teeth as Sergei stepped out, head down, eyes unreadable. You're sending him there? She asked a federal officer. He didn't look at her. That's where he belongs. But the evidence. Detective, he interrupted, you did your part. Let the system handle the rest. She didn't like his tone, or his certainty. Something about the way he avoided her gaze felt off, like he knew more than he was allowed to say. As the convoy pulled away, Sergei lifted his head for the briefest moment. Through the frosted window, she saw him mouth a single word. Run. But she couldn't hear the tone. Was it a warning? A plea? A threat? Days passed. Paperwork piled. The city returned to its routine. But one thing wouldn't leave Anya's mind. The blood on Sergei's coat hadn't matched the victim. It belonged to someone else, someone still unaccounted for. She requested updates from the prison. None came back. She submitted a formal inquiry. No answer. She tried contacting the federal officer who supervised the transfer. His number was disconnected. By the end of the week, the entire case felt like it had been swept into a locked room no one was supposed to enter. Then, on a Thursday morning, An envelope slipped under her office door. No return address. No stamp. Just her name, handwritten. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. Grainy. Old. Like a surveillance still from a decade ago. In it, a group of inmates stood in a dim hallway. Heads shaved, posture rigid. Hands chained behind their backs. The fluorescent lights above them flickered, bathing the scene in a ghostly blue. But one thing stood out. In the far left corner, barely visible, stood a man with the same limp as Sergei Antonov. A limp he didn't have until the night she arrested him. Meaning someone else, someone with that same injury, had been inside Black Dolphin long before Sergei arrived. And that could only mean one thing. Sergei Antonov wasn't the first person running from whatever haunted him that night. He was the second. A chill ran down Anya's spine. Every question she thought she had answered shattered at once. But the most terrifying one rose above all others. If Sergei was sent to Black Dolphin to disappear, what happened to the first man who tried to escape it? Her phone buzzed. A private number. She answered. A single breath came through the speaker. Detective Morova, a voice whispered, "You found the photograph. Good. Now stop asking questions." The call ended. Anya stood frozen. Her instincts screamed at her. Something terrible was waiting behind those prison walls. Something the world wasn't supposed to uncover. And she had just stepped onto a path that many before her never returned from. The shadow inside Black Dolphin. The first night inside Black Dolphin is designed to break a man. Alexei Morozov understood that the moment the iron door slammed behind him. No windows. No warmth. Just a concrete cage suspended between silence and madness. But the guards soon learned something. Morozov didn't crack. He studied. He waited. He adapted. Inside Russia's harshest prison, every inmate wakes at 6 a.m. to the echoing sound of boots hitting steel. They stand facing the wall, hands behind their back, eyes fixed forward. Morozov followed the rules with unsettling perfection. He never flinched, never complained, never made a sound. It didn't take long before the other inmates started whispering about him. The bookkeeper who didn't belong in a place full of murderers. But there was something they didn't know. Back in Moscow, investigators were still piecing together the truth behind the warehouse massacre. And new clues pointed toward something far more organized than a failed money drop. Files from a hidden laptop, found days after Morozov's arrest, showed encrypted messages, offshore transfers, and a pattern of movements across Europe that matched an international syndicate still active. The name Morozov appeared again and again, but always coded, always indirect, like he was a ghost, not a leader. And then investigators stumbled on something even stranger. A message sent 2 days after Morozov was already locked inside Black Dolphin. The accountant is safe. Continue as planned. Safe? Behind the walls of the most secure prison in Russia? Whoever wrote that believed Morozov wasn't imprisoned. They believed he was protected. Back inside Black Dolphin, Morozov kept to himself. He observed routines the way he once observed financial records, patterns, rhythms, weaknesses. Every inmate was paired with another cellmate, but Morozov's partner, Viktor Baranov, was more shadow than man. A former enforcer with a reputation for breaking bones with his bare hands, Viktor had survived 8 years inside by never speaking unless absolutely necessary. So when he turned to Morozov late one night and whispered, "They're going to test you soon," Morozov knew it wasn't a warning. It was a countdown. The test came during the weekly yard time, an outdoor cage where inmates shuffled in circles under arm towers. 2 men approached him, both with tattoos marking them as loyal to the same syndicate Morozov had once worked for. They didn't greet him. They didn't smile. They simply handed him a slip of paper and walked away. The paper held one sentence. "Do you still serve the Brotherhood?" A choice. A threat. A demand. Morozov tore the note to pieces and swallowed them before the guards noticed. He didn't answer. He wouldn't give them anything. But refusing the Brotherhood was the same as signing a death warrant. And someone must have whispered that message into the right ear, because 3 days later, Viktor woke him in the middle of the night with a single word. Move. Before Morozov could ask why, a scream echoed down the hallway. One of the syndicate loyalists. The scream tore into the walls, raw and terrified, until guards rushed past the cell with shields and rifles. Something bad had happened. Something intentional. But Victor didn't look surprised. Instead, he stared directly at Morozov. "You don't understand who you angered," Victor said. "They don't forgive silence. They punish it." The next morning, investigators outside the prison got another encrypted message. This one wasn't sent from Moscow, St. Petersburg, or anywhere on Russian soil. It originated in Germany. Stage 2 begins. Morozov will comply. But the strangest part was the signature. It wasn't a code name. It was a real name. Someone believed dead for over a decade. Someone tied to a string of assassinations across Europe. Someone believed to be the architect behind the very syndicate Morozov supposedly managed money for. The investigators realized something terrifying. Morozov wasn't the mastermind. He was the middleman. A financial genius, yes, but merely a piece on the board. The real player, the ghost, was still free. And now, for some reason, he needed Morozov alive. Inside the prison, tensions mounted. Guards increased patrols. Inmates whispered about a power shift, someone new pulling strings from the shadows. Victor started watching the door more carefully, sleeping less, speaking more. It wasn't fear. It was instinct, the instinct of a man who had survived too many ambushes. Then came the moment that changed everything. During a routine cell inspection, a guard lifted Morozov's mattress and found a razor blade taped beneath the frame. An illegal weapon. A guaranteed punishment. A potential death sentence. But Morozov didn't put it there. He knew who did. Someone wanted him moved, isolated, vulnerable. As guards handcuffed him and dragged him down the hallway, Morozov finally whispered to Victor, "Tell him I didn't take the blade." But Victor didn't answer. He just watched him walk away with a look that was equal parts pity and warning. They placed Morozov in solitary confinement, a pitch-black room where sound barely existed. For 2 days, the only noise was the echo of his own breathing. Then, on the third night, a voice whispered from the other side of the vent. "Your silence ends now. They're coming for you. And this time, they won't miss." Morozov's blood ran cold. He recognized that voice. He hadn't heard it in 9 years. But he knew exactly who it belonged to. The man the world believed dead. The man who built the syndicate. The only man Morozov ever feared. And he was inside Black Dolphin. The ghost in the dark. Black Dolphin Prison was designed so that no inmate could hide, no secret could survive, and no man could enter or leave unnoticed. Yet somehow, a ghost had walked through its steel gates. And now he was whispering to Morozov through the vents like a nightmare returning to life. For the first minutes after hearing the voice, Morozov didn't move. He didn't breathe. He didn't have to. His mind did the running for him. There was only one man who spoke with that cold softness, that deadly calm. Mikhail Sidorov, the man who built the syndicate from nothing. The man who vanished after a failed assassination in Prague. The man every intelligence agency in Europe assumed dead. But Morozov always suspected he wasn't. And now his voice crawled out of the darkness like a serpent made of memories. "You shouldn't have stayed silent," the voice murmured. "You made people nervous." Morozov pressed his back against the wall, forcing his thoughts to stay steady. "Why are you here?" he whispered. It was not fear that made his voice quiet, it was calculation. He needed to know what this man wanted. Sidorov chuckled. "You always were clever, even now in this hole." A pause. "I'm here because things are changing. The Brotherhood is expanding. We need access, pathways, accounts. You were always my door." Morozov understood instantly. The offshore accounts, the encrypted files, the mysterious payments investigators found after his arrest. Sidorov hadn't vanished. He had simply gone deeper. But inside Black Dolphin, Morozov said, "Why risk everything?" "Because," Sidorov whispered, "I am safer here than anywhere else on Earth." That sentence struck Morozov like a blow. Black Dolphin, The place designed to crush men, erase them, bury them alive in isolation, was somehow a sanctuary for one of the most dangerous criminals alive. And it made sense. No one was looking for a ghost inside a cage. "You're going to help me finish what we started," Sidorov said. "You'll handle the accounts again, direct operations from here. Just like Hoover in the States did. Prison means nothing as long as the network breathes." Morozov closed his eyes. This was what investigators feared. What the syndicate wanted. A criminal empire run from inside the world's most secure prison. "And if I refuse?" Morozov asked. A long silence. Then you'll be found the same way your friends were in that warehouse. Only colder." Morozov's stomach tightened. That night, that massacre. It wasn't police brutality. It wasn't a rival gang. It wasn't an accident. It was Sidorov cleaning house. "You set me up," Morozov whispered. Sidorov hummed, as if pleased he had finally pieced it together. "I needed someone to take the fall while I rebuilt. You were loyal, intelligent, predictable. I knew you wouldn't talk." Morozov felt something break inside him. Not fear, not anger, but something harder. Understanding. Sidorov hadn't come to recruit him. He had come to own him again. But Morozov wasn't the same man he had been 9 years ago. Prison had changed him. Victor's warnings. The assassination attempts. The hidden messages. Everything pointed to one truth. He had never been the bookkeeper. He had always been the pawn. And pawns could only survive one way. By reaching the other end of the board. Morozov stepped closer to the vent. "What if I said I want back in?" he whispered. Sidorov didn't hesitate. "Then we begin tonight." Morozov's pulse raced. He needed one thing, time. Time to think. Time to act. Time to make sure he didn't die in the darkness. "Yes," Morozov said. "Tonight." A satisfied breath drifted through the vent. Then the voice vanished. But Morozov wasn't alone for long. Minutes later, the steel door screeched open. The guards dragged him from solitary without explanation and returned him to the general block. Victor was waiting. "You heard him too," Victor said quietly. Morozov stared. "You knew he was here." Victor didn't blink. "I didn't know. I suspected. Rumors started weeks ago. Something moving in the shadows. People obeying orders no one saw given." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," Victor said, "I needed to know if you still feared him." Morozov swallowed. "And now you must choose," Victor said. "Run or rise." "There's no running in Black Dolphin." Exactly. The decision formed itself. Not a choice, an instinct. Morozov would not die here. Not as a scapegoat. Not as a puppet. Not as a legend crafted by someone else's hands. He would create his own. That night, a guard slipped a small folded note under his cell door. A sign that Sidorov's network still ran deep inside the prison. "Come to the South Wing. Midnight." Victor read it over Morozov's shoulder. "He's pulling you in." "Then I'll let him," Morozov said. When midnight came, they moved silently through the dim hallways. The South Wing was unfinished, half-built decades ago, abandoned due to cost. It was a place without cameras, without patrols. A place someone like Sidorov could use. They stepped into the darkness. A shape emerged. Calm, confident, smiling like a man greeting an old friend. Sidorov. But before he could speak, Victor whispered, "Now." Morozov stepped aside, and a spotlight exploded through the hallway. Guards poured in. Rifles raised. Orders shouted. Sidorov's face twisted, not with fear, but disappointment. "You told them," he whispered. "No," Morozov said. "I told someone who wanted you gone more than I did." One man stepped forward. The investigator who had hunted Sidorov for more than a decade. Sidorov lunged. A shot rang out. Then silence. The ghost finally fell. The next morning, news spread through the prison like wildfire. Sidorov dead. His network compromised. His influence broken. But Morozov? He didn't fade into obscurity. Authorities realized something. He had been coerced, betrayed, and manipulated. He became a key witness. His testimony brought down half the syndicate across Europe. From his cell, he became a symbol, not of power, but of a man who survived the darkness by refusing to stay silent. In Black Dolphin, Inmates whispered a new legend: the bookkeeper who outwitted the ghost, the man who turned a cage into a battleground, and won. And as the prison lights dimmed that night, Morozov whispered to himself, "If they think this story ends here, they don't know me at all." If you thought this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.